November 6th, 2022. Guys, it's been a fine day here in central Mississippi. A little warm for this time of the year, but beautiful skies, especially after that rough weather that came through here a couple of days ago. Folks were really caught it hard, Oklahoma and Texas and some other locations when we were doing the tornado watches. But it went on through and it cleared out. We're going to look at some updates on the tropical situation. It's changed a little bit. Watching Central Florida a little more than we were, but we'll get to that in a moment. You're looking at timeanddate.com, and I'll put a link to that, but it's easy to remember. This has got to do with questions about the eclipse, November 7th and 8th. Now, they're calling it a blood moon. That's going to be very large because it happens to be the moon's closest approach to our planet this year. So, you've got a full moon every month, but this happens to be that one. And people call it a blood moon. There's other names. But what the questions that I was getting was who is going to be able to see it, what time and where, things like that. So if you come here to timeanddate.com and it's /eclipse map, November 8, 2022. Again, I will link to it. But what you can see here is in this darker purple, which basically covers the Pacific Rim. Let me back this up a little bit. You've got the area who's the best area for viewing because you're going to see it the longest. The entire planet on the night side will see parts of this, almost. But if you're anywhere from central Russia over to the northwestern U.S., this is including Arizona, New Mexico, and you can see this line, guys, right there. And what you do is you've got about a 4-hour window to see it. It's going to start after midnight on Monday night, on the 7th. It's going to, again, I think around 2 a.m., but what you do is come here and pick out your location. It's going to give you information. But again, if you're on the very east coast of the U.S., you're going to start to see this just before it goes down and the sun starts to come up. In other words, not very long. The closer you get, central U.S., mountain time, the west coast, you guys are going to get a beautiful view. The dead center of this would be Alaska, the Aleutian Islands, and parts of Kamchatka, Russia, north of there. But that darker area is where you're going to have the longest period of time because as it's rising and setting, it's going to be setting as the sun's coming up on the east. But so that means you guys on the west coast again are going to get a long viewing time. So come here, and what you do is click on your area, say here in California. Now what that's going to do is I clicked here, it pulled up San Francisco. Duration is 5 hours, 53 minutes, 54 seconds. Duration of the totality of it, in other words, the full eclipse, 1 hour, 24 minutes, 57 seconds. The beginning of it is 12:02, November 8th, and that is Mountain Time. And you can come down, or Pacific Standard Time, PST. Now, it partial begins at 1:09. Full eclipse begins at 2:16:39 a.m. The maximum peak of it is at 2:59. The full ends at 3:41. Partial ends at 4:49. Penumbral ends at 5:56. Forecasting, so you got some rain showers, things like that in some areas. But again, you can come here and do that. You can X out of that, come over to the East Coast, and you'll see kind of a different situation. New York, you only got 3 hours, 38 minutes. The penumbral begins at 3:02 a.m. on the 8th. Now, that, in other words, going out of the 7th at midnight into the 8th that morning, the morning before the voting. And your penumbral begins at 3:02. Partial begins 4:09. The full begins at 5:16. So you can see you're starting to get some sunrise involved in this thing, and the moon setting over the west coast. The full begins at 5:16. The maximum at 5:59. You might as well say 6 o'clock. moon set, and that's when it will end, is at 6:41. So you've got that period of time in New York. Let's say, for instance, here in the central U.S., Oklahoma City, 5 hours, 5 minutes. The beginning of it starts 2:02 a.m. We're looking at, now if you look at this, Central Standard Time also, prenumbal begins 2:02, same thing as we saw almost on the East Coast. The maximum begins at 4:59, that's the hour difference. The full ends at 5:41, partial ends at 6:49. So your full beginning at 4:16 here in this part, say Oklahoma. And so you're going to have a pretty good view of it. You're just going to have to be up early. But anywhere you're at, you can come here and move this and get the weather, the time, in your time, and how much you're going to get to see of it. It's very interesting. And so it makes it quite simple. Now let's go to the National Hurricane Center. You can see the changes here also. You're looking at an impact area. Again, this is the average of the models. We'll look at the Canadian model and the Navy model. But now we're looking at a 90% chance of cyclone formation in 5 days. Guys, in 48-hour forecast, it is 80%. It's saying an area of low pressure located more than 200 miles north of Puerto Rico is producing a large area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms. This system is forecast to move northward and then northwestward into the southwestern Atlantic, where environmental conditions appear conducive for additional development. And a subtropical or tropical storm is likely to form in the next day or so. The system is then forecast to turn westward or west-southwestward over the southwestern Atlantic by the middle part of the week, where additional development is possible. Regardless of development and increasing risk of coastal flooding, tropical storm force winds, heavy rainfall, rough surf, and beach erosion along much of the southeastern U.S. The Florida East Coast and portions of the central and northwestern Bahamas beginning in the early to middle part of this week. Interest in those areas should continue to monitor the progress of this system, as tropical storm, hurricane, and storm surge watches could be required for a portion of these areas by early Monday. Additional information on the system, including gale warnings, can be found in the high seas forecast issued at the National Weather Service. Quick look at the satellite images of the Caribbean as we speak. Here is the center of this storm. It's not fully wrapped yet. That's about to start happening, I think. And that's what they're expecting. Again, a couple of 100 miles north of Puerto Rico. And what's happening, guys, is that you have this high pressure area pushing down here. The storm is projected to start to move northwestward and then actually be pushed down somewhat. So we're looking at either a very close skirt to Central Florida, the Orlando area, or a direct hit. We'll take a look at both models. Play this forward, take a look at that. Still very warm water out into the Atlantic, and it's just going to get warmer as it gets closer to the U.S. coast. Now, at the time, this is 5:30 p.m., and so this is 16 minutes old. These are the newest spaghetti models. And notice this bend right here in every model. And that's what I was saying about the high pressure system is going to bend the storm back south. Now, we've got the Canadian model that is not taking it into Florida. It's coming up and taking a very powerful swipe at Nag's Head because it's going to be over the water the entire time. But the Canadian model is bringing this thing in just north of the Orlando area, sweeping through Jacksonville, coastal Georgia, and all along the coast, again, possibly going back out to sea north of the Outer Banks in Sunday, 5:30 p.m. Now, first, the U.S. Navy model. Again, this one has it turning north before it hits Florida, and watch where it hits. Right here, very powerful as it does it. Bam, right, just about gets all of the North Carolina coast before it moves back out into the Atlantic. Right there, we're at November the 11th. Let's step this thing forward. Right there, still, notice how fast that it moves once it starts to turn north. And it's because of this opening in these orange areas of the high pressure area and of the high pressure dual areas, and it's going to take that gap. That's, again, the Navy model. That's the 11th. That's the 12th, just off the Outer Banks, Nags Head, in that area, very strong. Look, we're down into the very lowest sections of the millibar pressure. Very powerful storm. Moving off of the northeast coast, this is the 12th. But guys, you're going to catch a lot of high tide, a lot of rip currents, a lot of thunderstorms here, possibly waterspouts. And let's take a look at the Canadian model. Notice the high pressure keeps it trapped. It pushes it into north central Florida on the east coast, and we'll let that play through. Then the high pressure moves in and takes over. So according to the CMC model, here we are at November the 8th, election day. Let's move this forward. It's bending it back south, starting to strengthen, catches the northern tip of the Bahamas. November 10th, starting to really get tough there. And look how close this eye is to, or center circulation is to the coast. Keep this going through the 10th. Coming ashore right there, guys. You're going to have to pay attention to it. That's, again, the 10th. It's moving fast as it goes north. There's the 11th. Again, northeast Florida. It's not looking good for you. Moving up. By the 12th, it's weakened. It's over South Carolina, approaching North Carolina. Moving out. By the 13th, it's offshore. But again, the northeast coast. Really, it's going to be a lot of watches, whether it's high tide or storm surge or tropical storm watches and warnings or hurricane watches and warnings. Let it play all the way through here. Again, and it's kind of strange to be watching this in November, but technically the season does not end to the end of November. Here we come, starts to strengthen, dips in, takes a good chunk out of that coast of Florida. Looks like all of Georgia's coast gets it. And we know, guys, each day we are the 6th. We're at the 6th. And each day this thing is going to change. So everyone just keep an eye on it. We're not sure what it's going to do yet. You kind of look at the two extremes there. The first one, the Navy model, keeping it north and then pounding into the Virginia area. And then here, the Canadian model, you can see it. You got to pay attention. South Florida, you've already caught it. South Central Florida. Guys, we lost a lot of the nation's citrus crop there. And the prices of orange juice and things like that will definitely be affected during Hurricane Ian. I have friends down there from Perdido Bay that are, they move trees and cut them off houses and clear all of that up. And they're down in the Fort Myers area now. And there's still a lot of damage. People nowhere near started recovering as far as overall. So we're watching this, guys. You watch it. There's a lot going on. Let me emphasize this. We're about to get to the 8th. Tomorrow's Monday. Tuesday morning, what could happen between now and then? Well, I tell you what, Russia has put a vast attack all along the border with Ukraine right now, pushing back into Ukraine. If I can get more information about it, I'll put something up and I'll let you know. Most of it will be on Rumble. Not sure what I can get, but I have seen a map of a very long area along that Ukrainian border with Russia that is definitely coming under bombardment right now. One missile has hit the large dam north of Kherson. There was 6 missiles fired. They were U.S. missiles from Ukraine. 5 were shot down. None of them hit the dam, but one it hit the lock, which if you're downriver, it would be to the right. It's a lock where you can let the water up and down. That took a hit. They shot down 5 of the HIMARS, which are U.S. missiles that were shipped to Ukraine. We're watching it, guys. Things are really getting dicey. So heads up, be safe.